Well, look at this bad boy. This is Laowa 55mm f2.8 1x macro tilt shift lens. It's huge. It's so awesome though. Let me tell you this. I've been using tilt shift lenses for years for my portrait photography as a creative lens that can give me a unique perspective of having more than one thing in focus at a time. I've used 45 Canon tilt shift. I use 24 tilt shift. I recently mostly use the Steady Artisan 50mm tilt, but none of these lenses come close to this Laowa lens. And I'm not gonna lie, it's slightly above my pay grade. This lens can do much more than I've ever shot with lens like this, and it's definitely a great product photography lens, which I do not specialize in, but I do specialize in portraits, and I'll show you both some portraits and product photos that I've shot with this in situations that I really see benefit of using lens like this. For those of you who are new around here, my name is Magic. I've been shooting destination weddings for over 12 years now, and I'm Sony Europe ambassador. I've been running this YouTube channel about wedding photography and gear for over 3 years now, so please subscribe if you're into any of that. When I received this lens, I'm gonna be honest, I was a little bit surprised of how big it is. This is how it looks compared to the Canon full-frame DSLR tilt-shift lenses that I've used with adapters. And obviously there's a reason why it's so big. First of all, this is a mirrorless lens, so I do have a version for Sony mount, but it comes with all the other mounts, including Fujifilm G mount and Hasselblad XCD mount for medium format cameras, meaning yes, this lens can cover medium format sensors. The lens itself, it's all metal built. It feels very high quality for my taste and comes with multiple knobs and controls. And it might look a little overwhelming at first, but let me break it down for you. It's actually pretty intuitive when you kind of get a hang of it, but definitely it does need some practice. So let's start with the knobs. There are two large knobs on the top and on the side of the lens. The top knob allows you to control the tilt of the lens, letting you tilt it up or down 10 degrees. This is what gives you that creative effect where parts of the image that wouldn't normally be in focus can appear sharp at the same time. So let's say both foreground and background can be in focus at the same time. The smaller knob on the opposite side of that knob lets you lock the tilt position in place. Then the side knob controls the shift function, and we can shift this lens up to 12mm in any direction. And just like with tilt, there's a shift lock knob on the opposite side of the lens to lock the position, securing it, once you've adjusted it. Let me briefly tell you what is tilt and shift. So tilt lets you change the orientation of the focus plane, which allows you to achieve some unique depth of field effects. It's amazing for both creative portraits, where you can have more than one subject or area in focus, even if there are at different distances, but also like specifically for macro product photography, which I'm going to show you in a moment. Then what is a shift? Shift allows you to move the image up, down, left, or right within the frame without moving your camera. So this is particularly useful for product photography and architectural shots where you need to keep those straight lines straight to avoid perspective distortion. I personally have not used shift function much in my entire career because it's not particularly useful for, wedding photography specifically. Next, you have two rotation buttons. So there are two small buttons on the lens, one that lets you rotate the tilt axis of the lens and one that lets you rotate the shift axis of the lens. And this is where the things get quite interesting because you can align tilt and shift independently, which was not the case in any of the previous lenses that I've had. Then we have one addition to this lens, which is a shift holder. So the lens comes with this shift holder, kind of like a tripod mount, which is attached to the lens with the locks, and it's easily detachable if you want. The shift holder is mounted to a ring with a rotation scale, making it super easy to track and fine-tune your adjustment. And just like the rest of the lens, it can be easily locked in place using the knob next to it. So as you can see, a bunch of knobs and bunch of rings that lets you control this lens however you want. So it's a game changer if you're doing specific type of product photography or any work that require that perfect alignment and being able to change things dynamically. And then we have two rings, a small aperture ring that goes from f2.8 to f22 in a light clickable manner. The ring is actually really small and it's just next to the shift holder rotation ring. So they're quite similar, but this one has perforation that lets you fill it quite well. And then manual focus ring, which is quite big on this lens. Obviously, this lens is a manual focus lens, only like all of the tilt shift lenses currently available on the market. And I like how, this ring moves. It feels like nicely tight, offering you like this control and precise adjustment. So it's not super light, it's not super tight, it's something in between. And then on top of the lens, we have tiny metal lens hood that comes off, and the lens has a filter size of 77 millimeters. Okay, so now let's talk shooting with this lens in some sample photos. All of them edited my presets. If you like the look, you can check the presets down in the description. And first of all, because this lens is so big, using it for portraits like outdoors, like in the winter, which is now, it's quite challenging. Also, when the lens is rotated this way, there's zero space for fingers with my Sony A9 Mark III body. But for the portraits I was shooting, I didn't need the lens on this rotation because I was using only creative tilt effect. So I was able to rotate it to comfortably hold it and then use tilt axis rotation to decide how I want my plane of focus to be tilted in the images. And while I think the rotation mechanism is really great in this lens, allowing us for separate tilt and shift rotation, I do have a small gripe because the tilt axis rotation only locks at 90 degrees. So like this and like this, right? And then the shift axis rotation, which is down here, locks every 15 degrees, like giving you more controls. And for creative portraits, I do like sometimes to tilt the lens, let's say diagonally, which is still possible here, but either you need to rotate the shift axis, lock it, and then possibly lock your fingers out of the camera grip, or you just need to use tilt rotation but not lock. It is possible. So this is like a small issue that I personally had with this lens. But then the images, in my opinion, are exceptional. The quality of the glass gives us beautiful color reproduction, amazing contrast, and outstanding sharpness. I'm saying that because these things are not given with any of my previous tilt shift lenses. All of them were rather blurry, hazy, and had tons of aberration, while this lens is just perfect, like no aberration like whatsoever, super sharp, super contrasty. And then looking at these portraits, you can see my take on using the tilt capabilities. I can have both foreground elements in focus and background elements in focus when shooting at f2.8. Like in this image, for example, you have the sunset in the back in focus, or in this image, you have some leaves in front and some trees in back. So this can lead to many creative opportunities, in my opinion. That's at least how I like to use lenses like this. But then the most interesting use case of this lens that I found was when I was shooting some B-rolls for my upcoming A1 II versus A9 III video. If you're interested in that, make sure to subscribe. And I realized that I've never shot a macro lens like this. First of all, that 1x magnification gives you amazing perspective on details, and just look at the texture of the camera in this picture. But because you're getting so close, your depth of field is getting really, really shallow at f2.8. So this is where the tilt functionality comes in handy to actually angle your plane of focus differently to achieve, for example, a photo like this. So you can see all these cameras are in different distances from each other, but I was still able to focus on all of the camera name emblems, as you can see, because I just tilted the plane of focus. And this is where this lens shines, in my opinion. I feel like this is the target audience for this lens, like product photography, macro product photography with tilt and shift functionality. Definitely a super niche, but a niche that now have a great option to choose from. The price of this lens is $1,250, which in my opinion is fair, seeing what this lens has to offer. And you can check the links in the description to pre-order. I'm sadly shipping it back, but I'm hopefully gonna get some more chances to shoot with it in the future, maybe with a different, maybe in summer. I would love to shoot it in summer because winter now kind of limited my portrait shooting ability, but I feel like in summer I would love to try it out on a couple shoot. Let me know if this is something interesting to you. Leave the thoughts in the comments. I'm happy to read them, and I will see you soon in the next video. Ciao.